Hey guys, Brent Hull talking about one of the most iconic stairways in America. Come join me. One of my favorite places in America, in the world, is Winterthur. Winterthur is one of those collection of architectural interiors that I loved. Obviously there's furniture and other things there, but yeah, nothing about that. The architecture is awesome. Basically, William DuPont started collecting American rooms in the early 1920s, and into the 50s and 60s, he was buying rooms. And so he would find out about a house in Philadelphia is being torn down, he'd buy the parlor. Port Royal was a famous house in Philadelphia that was getting torn down, and he bought the rooms from that. Incredible 1640 to 1860, all kind of pre-industrial kind of rooms, handmade, hand-built stuff. Montmorenci was a house from North Carolina that he bought and installed a bunch of the millwork in his house. And so in that famous stair hall, you see this a beautiful elliptical stair going up 3 floors, done in the Federal style from North Carolina, and it's one of my favorites. Realize that, you know, it was one of Mr. DuPont's favorite rooms as well, because that was the entry hall. That was kind of an entry point that people led. That's where their Christmas tree was. That's where they spent a lot of time as a family. And so this was, you know, the house grew over time and kept growing. But at one point, especially when the DuPonts lived there, it was kind of this main showstopper entry hall with this incredible stair. So it's done in the Federal style. Remember, Federal is kind of that 1780s, 1790 to the 1820s, 1830s. Montmorenci was this house in North Carolina that was built, really a wonderful house. We know that he ordered a lot of his stuff from Philadelphia. He ordered, you know, his composition moldings. The Federal style is kind of a departure from the Georgian. It's not as heavy, it's not as bold, and so the moldings aren't as heavy, and they would apply these composition moldings to the face of things so that you would have kind of this dainty light feel. Now, looking around that room and the amazing things they did there, you'll see these amazing windows, this wainscot with this very interesting woodwork inside there. There's the chair rail or cap of the wainscot has this neat architectural detailing in it. And so what that is, what you're looking at is Federal detailing, because Federal detailing, as opposed to being heavy and bold, was light. And so you'd almost have to get up close to see how much detail is going on there. A Federal stair like this means that the balusters, the individual spigots or balusters, were smaller, okay? And the volute at the bottom of the stair is tighter. And so versus like a Georgian stair like you would see at Philadelphia Hall or something like that, those balusters were, 2-3 inches thick. The balusters at Montmorenci are 1 inch by 3/4 kind of thing. They're small, right? They're the whole dainty feel like. The other thing that you'll see is that on the Georgian stair, you might have these hard turns and lines and things, and it'd just be a heavy, bold stair. The graceful elliptical turn that's taking place with this Montmorenci stair is part of the magic and part of like the elliptical shape. The fan lights over a front door were often elliptical, right? Because they brought in that oval shape inspiration as opposed to the circle, which is part of the Georgian. So one of the things that's interesting about Montmorenci is that at the time when Mr. DuPont was buying rooms, okay, the whole market of buying period rooms was a big deal. There is a whole book called Moving Rooms, which goes back to the European example and how rooms used to be traded, bought, sold. And there was actually a group of designers who would go out on these things and go looking for rooms that were going to be sold, houses that are falling into disrepair. And at Montmorenci, there was a number of people looking, because this was a great early 1800s house that had just fallen into disrepair after the Civil War. Mr. DuPont actually got in a car and drove there. Now, he had to kind of do it under the cover of night. I don't think he went there at night, but it was one of those things where he had to be secretive about it, because if word got out that he was trying to buy this room, obviously the prices double, the prices go up. And so he kind of sneakily went in there and checked it out and was like, yeah, no, this is incredible, and ended up purchasing the room. So there's a whole bunch of back office dealings and under the counter things that were going on that were part of moving these rooms around and buying these spaces, because There was a great love for this beautiful design that we can't get that anymore. I think that we're going to enter that period again, because I think as design has become so monotonized and so plain that we look back to the past and be like, actually, that's pretty good looking. I wonder how I can get that. And I've got clients saying that to me. Like, we've sold rooms. The Tavern's a good example. That was an historic room that we actually, there was the Rockefeller apartment in New York. We buy it. It comes through Texas. It goes to my client who's looking for a tavern. And so that's still happening, and that magic is still out there. And so that's what was going on in the 20s and 30s when he was trying to buy this and trying to look at this property. So there's all this intrigue and magic that goes along with finding this incredible room and bringing it to Winterthur. So one of the great pictures of Montmorenci is this black and white photo that shows this beautiful arch and the stair in the background, okay? That's what Mr. DuPont saw when he goes there. That's what he's looking at going, wow. And it is a wow. It is amazing. But think about technologically how that stair would have been built and how it would have been made. One of the challenges of getting that stair to Winterthur was the fact that how do we take this apart and rebuild it? That really is something that changed, and spoiler alert, they weren't able to take that original stair and put it exactly the way it had been at Montmorenci, because it kind of fell apart. And it fell apart because of the construction methods that they were using. The way that was held together was one of the magic of handcrafting and building a stair in place. Whoever did it was a master, because what you're doing when you're doing an elliptical stair like that is you're creating tension between the wood, and you're twisting, okay? And that twisting of those, skirt boards and those framing elements creates this glue or this tension that allows it to hold in place. And so if we're building, for instance, sometimes an elliptical stair, we'll take plywood, like 1/8" plywood, and laminate it to itself so that we get this big structural connective piece that's going to hold it all together. But if you try to take it out of there, it kind of starts falling apart because the treads are important and are locked in. And almost think about it as a spoke of a wheel, that if you pull out these spokes and pull out these things, that it loses its integrity and its strength and the thing that's holding it together. So technologically, right, it was a very difficult stair to rebuild, and they actually ended up building it with steel because they couldn't take those original parts and pieces and do it. So what you're looking at is an inspiration of the original, but you can see from the original that there really was a masterpiece. There really was a beautiful elliptical turn that took place there that was magic. As a preservation guy, whenever you pick up an old house and move it, it kind of loses the historic authenticity because it's been moved, but it happened all the time. One of the houses we're going to go look at in Boston is a house that's been moved a number of times. And so that was part of how they dealt with things. But in the preservation world, there's this, how original is it, what's going on? Realize that in 1920, okay, or 1930, or even into the 1940s, even as late as the 70s and 80s, okay, preservation ideas and preservation thinking was not the same. I've told you the story that I was at North Bennett Street, and we went to look at the Met and some of the historic rooms there, and they had weaved the floors together like we build floors today, where you have short pieces and you weave them all together. And I remember my instructor going, this floor isn't right. And so, well, what wasn't right? Well, they would never have laid a floor like this. This is a modern way of laying a floor. So we have learned as preservationists and gotten better and better at being more authentic when we're doing things. So is the stair at Montmorenci original? Is it historic? Is it, true preservation? Yes, no, yes, right? Or no, yes, no. What I'm saying is that, one, it doesn't matter necessarily that much to me. If you want to be a purist, I think what they did was they took inspiration from the original, but they couldn't put it back together the way it was. And so they, used the spindles, used the balustrade, used the treads and the different things like that as much as they could, but you're looking at an inspired piece as opposed to a true preservation. I don't think it really matters. The collection at Winterthur is so special and so original and so unique that there's so much to learn there. There's such rich texture there. We are trying to be inspired from the past, and we certainly are by looking at that. So one of the interesting things that as I teach my team and we talk about design is that you have in the classical system this rigid order, we call it canonical, the canon of classical design and what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to work. And then you have this Americanized version of it, okay? Because we were a small country, we didn't have a lot of fine craftsmen, there weren't really architects here. And so we are a learning, practicing society and how we build and put things together. So Montmorenci, is it, this true high style federal? Kind of, but it's also built in the country, not certainly by a master builder, skilled craftsmen certainly, but the American story is wrapped into this thing, which I love, and what I'm trying to train to my guys is that, look, you can't, we're not going to design it that way. Yes, that's the way it would have looked in the pattern book, but in America, it never looked that way. If you look at, I like this Colonial Interiors book, and if you look at these books and look at the stairs and how these things were being made, you're going to see some similar detailing in here. For instance, the way this volute comes down and the light, dainty size of these stairs and that little elliptical turn at the top, the simple, dainty nature of this thing. There is an American way of building. There's an American way of putting this together. And there's a book, an English book on federal stairs in the English period, or the Adamesque, oftentimes were iron. We were trying to mimic that ironwork with thin wood balusters. So there's a real American story there, is my point. There's a real American way of building that is shown off and I think, has its own style and its own story. I think it's pretty special. Just to you guys out there learning and trying to be a master builder, wanting to be inspired from the past, you need to go to Winterthur, okay? That's the point. You need to go to Colonial Williamsburg. You need to go to some of these places and these historic towns that have preserved and show this off, because this really is special. Go on the tour that I tell everybody to go on. You will see this stair hall, you will see this. Look around at the wainscot, look around at the door headers, look around at all the trim, the way the moldings run up on the ceiling. There's such good federal details there, and there's such good stuff, and just kind of putting all these details together that can make your jobs better, more authentic, more real, more powerful. Let me know what you guys think. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.